right, so we're diving into the Book of Ether. We're talking about ancient mysteries, lost civilizations.
Right.
It's like we're archaeologists today carefully dusting off these fragments of a history that's forgotten by most of the world. And our guidebook for this dig is the Book of Ether.
Absolutely.
This record supposedly kept on metal plates.
Yeah.
It's going to be exciting to see what we find.
It's a fascinating book, and what makes the Book of Ether so fascinating is that, it's like we're opening up the Book of Mormon, and then there's this, like, hidden room in this ancient house.
Right.
And it gives us this whole other narrative of a civilization, their rise and their fall, that happened even before we think the main events of the Book of Mormon take place.
Like a whole other world layered in there.
Exactly.
Like, how did they even get there?
Right.
Like, we have to start at the beginning. These Jaredites didn't just pop up out of nowhere, did they?
Not at all. They have an origin story, too.
Okay.
And it all starts, their story begins at a massive tower.
Okay.
And you might actually find this familiar. It echoes the Tower of Babel story.
Okay.
That's found in a lot of ancient cultures.
I've heard of that, yeah.
Yeah, this recurring idea of humanity unified, reaching for something greater.
Okay.
And then this event that scatters them, right?
So we've got this tower, and instead of just language confusion,
Right.
we've got a specific group choosing to leave. Those are our Jaredites, right?
That's right.
Led by a guy named Jared.
Well, led by Jared and his brother.
And his brother, okay, so it's the brother of Jared that really takes the spotlight in this part of the story.
He really does.
What do we know about him?
Well, he's depicted as incredibly faithful, someone who has these, like, powerful, direct encounters with God.
Okay.
And we're not just talking about everyday prayers here.
Right.
This is full-blown dialogue, requests, and responses that really just highlight this, like, this divine drama, if you will.
So it's giving Moses on Mount Sinai vibes. But this isn't just guide us to a good place. This is next level asking.
Oh, yeah. Big demands here.
Okay, what kind of requests are we talking about here?
Well, he's basically saying, okay, we need a land, but not just any land. We need the best land. We need a promised land just for us.
Wow, demanding.
Right. But it's not just about finding a nice spot on a map.
Okay.
These are people fleeing into the unknown, a vast ocean journey, without the benefit of, well, any navigational tools we take for granted.
No compass, no GPS.
No, none of that.
Just a whole lot of faith.
A whole lot of faith.
And a pretty good boat builder, I assume.
Yeah, they had to have some skills.
How did they even manage that part of the journey?
This is where the Book of Ether gets really specific, really visual, which I find fascinating.
Yeah.
God tells the brother of Jared, okay, you need to construct these barges. But not just any boats. They're described as incredibly tight, almost like imagine ancient submarines.
Okay.
And get this, they're supposed to be completely dark inside.
Okay, I consider myself a bit of an adventurous spirit, but a completely dark, sealed-up boat across an ocean.
Yeah.
That's a whole different level of trust exercise. Like, I can't even imagine
I know,
what's going through their mind.
They had to be thinking, what are we getting ourselves into?
And how are they even supposed to see?
Right.
Are we talking bumping around in the dark for weeks on end?
That's where the story takes this truly remarkable turn.
Okay.
The brother of Jared, again, in another moment of direct communication with God, he asks for a light source.
Okay.
He says, look, it's dark in here.
Right.
We need some light.
Of course.
And what he's instructed to create are these 16 glowing stones.
Okay, now this feels like we've stepped into a legend.
I know, it's amazing.
I could just picture these, like ancient mariners, huddled around these glowing stones, the only light in this vast and terrifying ocean.
Mm.
What do these stones represent to you in this grand scheme of this Jaredite narrative?
It's such a powerful image, isn't it? I think it speaks to these recurring themes of faith and divine intervention that run throughout the Book of Ether.
Okay.
You have this incredibly difficult, even impossible situation, and the solution comes from this almost unimaginable act of faith.
Yeah.
And let's be honest, divine generosity.
Right.
It really elevates the story beyond a simple migration tale.
It definitely makes you stop and think.
Yeah.
Imagine being one of the Jaredites, huddled in that pitch black boat,
Right.
the fate of your people resting on these glowing stones.
Can you imagine the pressure?
That's a powerful image of trust and hope, right?
Absolutely.
But eventually they have to reach land, right?
They do.
Okay.
That's where the next chapter of their story begins.
All right.
They reach this promised land,
Right.
this new world, full of potential, and they got busy building, creating, establishing themselves in this unfamiliar territory.
So it's the classic story of a civilization kind of finding its footing.
Exactly.
But what did finding their footing actually look like?
Right.
Are we talking sprawling cities, complex irrigation systems?
We don't get into those specifics in the Book of Ether, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But what it does focus on is this. The establishment of kings.
Okay.
We see this transition from a more nomadic existence to a more settled hierarchical society
Okay.
with a king at its head.
Right, because every good civilization needs a good leader.
Well, that's the idea, right?
Makes sense to me.
But, and this is where the Book of Ether gets really interesting,
Yeah.
at least from a sociological perspective, it highlights this recurring pattern, this cycle of prosperity and decline.
Oh, I knew it. I knew it.
It's like clockwork.
What goes up must come down.
Exactly, a tale as old as time.
Give me the ancient history crash course version. What did this cycle look like for the Jaredites?
Okay, so think of it this way.
Okay.
You've got a righteous king
Right?
who leads with wisdom and justice.
Okay.
Think like King Oriha.
King Oriha, got it.
He's actually praised for his humility and his dedication to preserving like the memory of their ancestors' struggles.
He sounds like a good one.
He seemed like a decent guy. Things prosper under his rule.
Okay.
But then generational shifts happen, right?
Oh, no.
His descendants,
Okay.
those who didn't experience those same hardships, they start to take their good fortune for granted.
It's like they forgot where they came from.
Exactly. This sort of societal amnesia, right?
Oh.
The Book of Ether doesn't shy away from like the dangers of forgetting the past, of losing sight of the values that led to their success in the first place.
Oh, I feel that.
Right. Power corrupts, as they say.
Yeah, it's true.
Take, for example, King Korihor,
Okay, who's he?
a descendant of Oriha. He becomes a cautionary tale. He gets seduced by power, establishes a rival kingdom,
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
even imprisons his own father.
Talk about family drama.
Right.
Oh, my goodness.
So you see these seeds of kind of discontent and ambition being sown.
Right, okay.
And it's not just bad leadership, right? We talked about those secret combinations earlier.
Right, they sound like they were up to no good.
They were a different kind of threat.
Okay, how so?
More insidious than just a power-hungry king.
Okay.
Think of them like a social virus.
Okay.
Slowly but surely, infecting the very fabric of Jaredite society.
Okay, I'm getting chills just thinking about it. What made these groups so dangerous?
They were masters of manipulation.
Okay.
Bound by secrecy and fueled by, you guessed it, ambition.
Of course.
They would infiltrate all levels of society, using bribes, threats, even assassination to get their way.
Wow, ruthless.
Absolutely. They were more interested in personal gain than the well-being of their community.
Did anyone see them coming? Was there any attempt to, stop them?
The Book of Ether does tell us that prophets arose, warning the Jaredites about the dangers of these secret combinations,
Okay.
urging them to repent, to change their ways.
But did they listen?
That's the thing. Their warnings often fell on deaf ears.
Of course.
Yeah.
Because who wants to listen to a prophet when you're, living the good life, right?
That's human nature, isn't it?
Yeah.
To ignore the storm clouds gathering on the horizon.
It's a lot easier to ignore a problem than to actually fix it.
Especially when those problems are, deeply rooted in society.
But we're talking of more than just ignoring a few prophets here. This all culminates in this final
Yes.
devastating war.
Yes.
And this is where Coriantumr, the last Jaredite king,
Right.
and his rival, Shiz, they enter the scene.
That's right.
Tell me more about this final chapter, this last stand of a civilization on the brink.
This wasn't just any war. This was the culmination of, generations of social unrest, political intrigue, spiritual decline.
Wow.
It was a conflict so deeply woven into the fabric of their society that it ultimately consumed them all.
And leading the charge on one side is Coriantumr.
That's right.
This last in a long line of Jaredite kings. So we've got Coriantumr, this last king, facing off against Shiz.
Right, and this wasn't just some petty squabble over territory or resources. This feels bigger.
Yeah.
The whole weight of Jaredite history is bearing down on this one conflict.
Like the final showdown.
Exactly.
So tell me, what made this war so devastating? What were the stakes?
It was brutal, absolutely brutal. We're talking massive battles, cities reduced to rubble.
The book doesn't really hold back on the details, does it?
It doesn't sugarcoat the violence at all.
Wow.
It describes entire landscapes just littered with the dead.
Just bodies everywhere?
Everywhere. Imagine the sheer scale of
I
destruction.
can't even imagine.
The despair, the knowledge that their world was literally crumbling around them.
And as if the constant threat of violence wasn't enough, they had this curse on their tools and weapons, too.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
What a bizarre and kind of terrifying detail.
I know, it's easy to overlook that part.
What do you make of that? Like, what's the significance there?
I think it adds this chilling layer of, like, psychological torment to an already desperate situation.
Okay, I can see that.
Imagine living in a world where you couldn't even trust your tools.
Yeah.
Where the things you rely on for survival could just vanish overnight.
Yeah, that's wild.
It speaks to a breakdown of order.
Wow.
Like a sense that the very fabric of their society was unraveling.
No wonder they were so obsessed with protecting what they had left.
Exactly.
So this all culminates at the hill Rama, right?
That's right, their final stand.
What happens there?
By the time we reach Rama, both sides are utterly spent, depleted, just clinging to this desperate hope of victory.
They're both exhausted at this point.
Completely.
But what's striking is that it's not just soldiers involved in this final battle.
You're right.
It's everyone.
The Book of Ether actually describes women and children present on the battlefield.
Everyone. Why?
That's a good question and a disturbing one. I think it demonstrates just how deeply this conflict had infected their society.
Wow.
It's like they were so blinded by hatred,
Right.
so consumed by this need to destroy the other,
Just consumed by it.
that they lost sight of everything else. It's a tragic reminder of how quickly societies can unravel when they're driven by fear and division.
So how does it end? How does this epic showdown, this clash of civilizations, finally end?
Imagine this: a desolate landscape, the air thick with the stench of death.
Oh, that's awful.
The Book of Ether describes a battle that raged for days.
Days.
Days, a desperate, brutal fight for survival.
And in the end,
Millions dead.
the millions.
The Jaredite civilization, once so full of promise, utterly destroyed.
All gone.
It's a chilling account, but a necessary one.
So what can we learn from the Jaredites?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Are their mistakes just stories in an ancient book, or are they cautionary tales?
Things we can learn from.
Warnings we can heed to chart a different course.
I think that's something worth thinking about. Well, on that note, this has been a fascinating deep dive
It has.
into the Book of Ether.
A powerful book with a lot to say.
And until next time, keep seeking, keep asking questions, and keep exploring the mysteries of the past.
Because the past has a lot to teach us.